In the movie Noroi the Curse, there is a demon known as Kagutaba, but it is less of a demon and more of a Lovecraftian entity, something ancient and incomprehensible, able to infest families, corrupt children, and spread itself through dark rituals that should have stayed forgotten. It drives people to madness, manipulates them into performing ceremonies they don't understand, and leaves behind trails of something that shouldn't exist in our world. Hello everyone, happy Halloween, and welcome to another video where I will be talking about some cosmic horror that I have consumed in media recently. And today we actually have two themes going on. The first is Lovecraftian concepts in J-horror, more specifically in two mockumentaries by director Koji Shiraishi. And the second theme is two short stories that both feature dark, forbidden festivals, one by Lovecraft and one by Legati. You can expect spoilers, and let's get started. Noroi the Curse is considered by many to be the best found footage horror movie of all time, and that's for good reason. The unsettling atmosphere and the looming presence of some eldritch being behind the scenes is unlike anything else I've seen. The story is told through many news reportings and reality shows, and the character progressing the story is Kobayashi, a journalist who is really more of a detective dealing with the paranormal, which is of course my favorite kind of detective. The movie starts by telling you that after Kobayashi finished the movie you are about to watch, his wife died, his house burnt down, and he himself was never seen again, which is some pretty sinister information to lay down right in the beginning, and it sets the tone well. From the very beginning, these fragments of lost media give us piece after piece of the overarching mystery, and each one locked me into the story more. There are chains that keep spawning and dead pigeons everywhere. There is a tinfoil psychic who keeps seeing ectoplasmic worms and is deeply afraid of Kagutaba. One of the TV episodes features two paranormal researchers and an actress, Marika, who go exploring an old shrine. The girl hears a man's voice, and from this point forward she's cursed, sleepwalking and drawing strange symbols unconsciously. Another of the reality shows features a girl, Kana, who is able to guess every shape despite them being hidden, and she's even able to materialize water. She talks to people that aren't there. She also unconsciously draws images, and eventually she disappears. There are two people who claim to hear babies crying from their neighbors, even though their neighbors don't have any babies. And this hint is actually the most important one. Everyone who complained about this crying had the same neighbor, this lady and her son. But to get the full story, we'll need to rewind. Years ago, there was a village called Shimokage, where sorcerers performed a ritual every year to appease the demon Kagutaba. They originally used to summon him instead and use him as a weapon, but he switched up and started doing evil things, so they had to trap him and change the ritual to appease him instead. And it was none other than that lady that cosplayed as the demon in the ritual the last time it was performed. She went crazy after that and moved to Tokyo, but not before the whole village flooded. She became a nurse at a hospital that performed abortions 22 weeks into the pregnancy, and rumors went around the hospital that she took the embryos home for some strange purpose. Marika had been cursed this whole time, so she and Kobayashi go to where Shimokage used to be before it flooded, and they perform the ritual themselves so that her curse would be lifted. And she says it worked, her soul feels lighter. But they actually brought the psychic on the field trip, and he just starts tweaking, saying that it went bad, and he runs off into the woods. The others follow him, and we get to the climax. Marika is screaming on the ground, and the psychic is running towards something. He eventually reaches the ghost of a girl, surrounded by embryos, or maybe these are the ectoplasmic worms. The lady from the ritual hung herself, and Kobayashi finds Kana's body and a boy who he decided to adopt. Turns out that the reason the lady kept all those embryos was to resummon Kagutaba through an ancient ritual that involved sacrificing monkeys and feeding them to a medium. And also dogs were involved, but their purpose isn't too clear to me. So she had kidnapped Kana and fed her embryos as a way to transfer Kagutaba into her from the boy. So I think that during that last ritual, Kagutaba corrupted her and made her a servant of his. Then afterwards, she did everything in her power to summon him back up. I believe this boy is the vessel of Kagutaba, but they tried to transfer him to Kana. When he's at Kobayashi's house, weird stuff starts happening. The psychic is back and tweaks out on the boy, and the boy's face morphs to Kagutaba. The biggest unresolved mystery to me is the ectoplasmic worms. That concept really intrigued me. Their faces appear when Kana draws it in the very beginning, and the camera feed with the psychic. You could say they appear in the chain formations, and around Kana towards the end. I believe they are Kagutaba's minions, or at least something from his dimension, but they are unable to be seen by regular people. Only those with psychic abilities, or in moments when the camera glitches. I came across this theory on Reddit by a deleted user that suggests that Kagutaba's ultimate goal is reproduction. The fetus and baby imagery, along with the transfer from the boy to Kana through the ritual, may mean that Kagutaba seeks a female host to give birth to its offspring. And even though he's referred to as a demon, Kagutaba is more of an eldritch, unclassifiable entity. The ectoplasmic worms could be extra-dimensional offspring, comparing Kagutaba to Lovecraftian monsters like the goat with 1,000 young. So Noroi came out in 2005, and 4 years later, Shiraishi made Occult. It has similar vibes, although this one is a bit simpler and easier to follow. It isn't as praised as Noroi, and while I agree that Noroi is better, I like this one a lot too. One of the reasons it's considered inferior is the pretty bad CGI at times, but I honestly didn't have much of a problem with it since I was pretty immersed in the story and I was able to look past it. Everything started when a man stabs several people on a bridge, and then he jumps off into the water, never to be seen again. Several years later, a documentary film crew investigates this event and interviews the victims who survived, along with any connections to the killer. Here is when the film hooked me in, because they slowly start revealing strange things, and with each new one I was more invested in the story, much like I was with Noroi. One of the guys said that he still sees his girlfriend that died, but only in pictures. A guy who knew the killer randomly gets a nosebleed and starts throwing up when simply talking about it. And then there's the main character, Eno. Instead of getting stabbed to death, he gets a peculiar shape carved into his back, and he's told that it is now his turn. Also after this, he started seeing things like UFOs and ghosts, along with daily miracles that started happening to him, which he says he's very grateful for. We learned that the killer also used to talk about UFOs and ghosts, and the shape he carved on Eno is actually a birthmark that he always had, and he said that it was God's signature. So by now we have all the ingredients for a good cosmic horror tale. Disappearing people, bizarre events, cryptic symbols, and the feeling that a powerful entity is behind it all for reasons unknown to us. The film crew follows Eno around to try to record those miracles that he started seeing since the attack. While researching the symbols, they come across an artist that draws in the state between sleep and wakefulness. She makes a shape that looks like Kutoro rock. Kutoro meaning the rock of the nine-headed spine. The director, who also happens to be the real director of the movie, Shiraishi, had went there on the day of the stabbing. And when he went, he felt 9 leeches on his leg. They go back to investigate, and the bite marks from the 9 leeches mysteriously return. They also find a rock that has various symbols, some matching to the stab wound and the birthmark. And to explain these symbols, they get none other than Kiyoshi Kurosawa, the director, most famously known for Cure and Pulse, both of which I love. In this movie, he's himself, and also an enthusiast of historic ruins that happens to know everything about Kutoro Rock. He explains that the deity worshipped there is called Hiruko, meaning leech child, the first son of Izanami and Izanagi. He was born without any limbs, crippled and deformed. Kurosawa also explains the symbols. There is an oracle, giving orders, and another is killing living things. So Hiroko ordered the killer to do the thing on the bridge, and that curse is now passed on to Eno. We get to witness more of Eno's powers. He gets a premonition that someone will get hit by a car, and sure enough they do. He also records a bunch of things that look like eye floaters, which I found to be truly terrifying since I see eye floaters all the time. And I always thought they would make an interesting thing to put to the screen, and what do you know, I found a movie that did it, so that's pretty cool. And it's a little strange that nobody else is able to see these things, yet Eno is perfectly able to capture them with a video camera. Maybe his powers extend to using cameras to see what others can't. Eno eventually admits that God wants him to commit another tragedy, like we saw in the beginning, and the director, of course, tells him that he can't do that. And although Eno refers to it as God, I am not so sure about that, since he makes him do some heinous things later on. So as they are walking home, they see a huge white blob in the sky, and then Eno grows tentacles out of his head and scares the director to death. He changes his mind and starts agreeing with Eno, thinking that his mission now is to document the events that will follow, including the next tragedy. And I think the director was destined to be a culprit from the start because of his trip to Hiroko when he was attacked by the leeches that suspiciously happened on the same day as the initial attack. Then when he sees Tentacle Eno, the leech marks spawn back on his leg. And maybe this is the reason that Eno was able to capture those things with a camera, because the director was given the ability to capture these bizarre things caused by the entity. So the two of them plan the attack and even build a bomb. And the final moments of the movie is them getting food and going to the movies, knowing what they are about to do, and that kind of left me with a bad taste in my mouth. Especially with how confident they were that this is the right thing to do because of what the entity instructed them. And for the whole movie, Eno is extremely chill and unfazed by all these things, kind of just accepting this new reality and mission as no big deal. After the attack, we get to see this other dimension that Eno crossed over to, and he calls it Hell, but I'm not too sure that it's just Hell. It might be the domain of whatever entity made him do this. Maybe because it wanted more souls there, to give it power or feed off of, or something along those lines. Maybe this is where the ectoplasmic worms from Noroi come from as well. It does look a little silly with the CGI, but there is something unsettling about how bad it looks. Like imagine going to hell and it's just floating screaming heads with bacteria and a color-changing backdrop. If you look at both movies, there are definitely similarities between Kagutaba and Hiruko. Kagutaba seems to be more about reproduction with his countless ectoplasmic worms and wanting fetuses in his ritual, while Hiruko seems to just want human sacrifice. However, both of them possess humans to reach their goal, and both of them cause bizarre events in our reality, whether it's chains or floaters. I will say I like how they complement each other, and when it comes to Lovecraftian monsters on film, these two work really well, despite them never showing themselves or even speaking. Another cool thing is that Hiruko is a real deity in Japanese folklore, also known as Abisu. He's the god of fishermen and luck. On the surface, I couldn't find anything about him being evil in the folklore, but I'm sure there is something that I missed. Or maybe Shiraishi just wanted to pick a good god and turn him bad. The Festival is a short story by H.P. Lovecraft, and despite fitting in well for Halloween, it also has some Christmas vibes, so that's great. The story begins with the narrator going to a town that he was summoned to by his ancestors, a place he has dreamt of before but never actually been in real life. He says that his ancestors were old even when this land was settled 300 years before. And they were strange, because they had come as dark furtive folk from opiate southern gardens of orchids, and spoken another tongue before they learned the tongue of the blue-eyed fishers. He also says that his ancestors came out of the water, so maybe this is something like the shadow over Innsmouth with the village full of fish people, except this one isn't told by a complete outsider since he has some ties to the ancestors of this place. The town is incredibly silent and creepy, a true Lovecraftian setting. There are no footsteps in the snow, no people in the street, and all the windows are shut. He goes to the house that he has been summoned to, and he's greeted by a strange-looking old man. However, when he approached the door to get it for him, no footsteps could be heard. And this guy communicates with a wax tablet and stylus, rather than speaking to him. So the narrator goes inside and hangs out with the man and his wife. Now that they're in the candle-lit room, the narrator can see the faces of these two, and they are extremely bland, their eyes don't move, and they just look weird. So much so that the narrator thinks they're wearing wax masks instead of those being their real faces. There's still some time before the festival begins, so the narrator sits down and takes a look at the books that are in the room. One of which is the infamous Necronomicon. As he's reading, the guy whose house this is, I'll just call him the Mentor from now on. The Mentor comes in antique robes and says that it's time to go to the festival. They leave the house, and so does everybody else. There's a line forming with cloaked figures going to some place. Everybody uniformly agreeing. A throng of cowled, cloaked figures that poured silently from every doorway and formed monstrous processions up the street, and that Past the creaking signs and antediluvian gables, the thatched roofs and diamond-paned windows, threading precipitous lanes where decaying houses overlapped and crumbled together, gliding across open courts and churchyards where the bobbing lanthorns made eldritch, drunken constellations. The people feel off and old, older than any humans that would be seen in an old town. The narrator says that their elbows feel too soft and their stomachs too pulpy. Their destination is a big white church with a black door. They go inside and immediately start descending into the crypt. And the way they're moving is described as a sine wave, which I thought was kind of creepy since I've seen bugs do that thing, just uniformly agreeing silently that they are all forming this line and going somewhere. I thought that was pretty cool. So they go in the crypt and they reach quite a bizarre setting. There spread out before me the boundless vista of an inner world. A vast fungus shore lidden by a belching column of sick greenish flame, and washed by a wide oily river that flowed from abysses frightful and unsuspected to join the blackest gulfs of immemorial ocean. Fainting and gasping, I looked at that unhallowed erebus of titan toadstools, leprous fire, and slimy water, and saw the cloaked throngs forming a semicircle around the blazing pillar. It was the Yule rite, older than man and fated to survive him, the primal rite of the solstice and of the spring's promise beyond the snows, the rite of fire and evergreen, light and music. So there's a fire pillar that doesn't cast shadows or provide warmth, a shadowed figure playing the flute, and everybody else gouging at the vegetation. The mentor is there writhing at the pillar, and he makes a motion to the flute player, upon which the flute player changes the key and starts playing louder. And this really makes the narrator go insane, so we've reached that point in the story now. He falls to the ground, and he's transfixed with a dread not of this nor any world, but only of the mad spaces between the stars. Then out of the darkness come some winged creatures that no sound eye could ever wholly grasp. They had webbed feet and membranous wings, and the people mounted them and flew them across the river into the darkness. The mentor waits behind and wants the narrator to also mount one and go with them, but the narrator doesn't really feel like doing all that. The mentor says that the most secret mysteries are yet to be performed, but the narrator isn't budging. At this point, the winged creatures that are waiting for them start getting restless and clawing at the ground. The birds try flying away and the mentor stops them, but in doing so, something falls off his head, and it was something that looked like a mask, so I guess he was wearing one the whole time. And at this point, the narrator goes full insane and jumps into the strange water, into the oily underground river that bubbled somewhere to the caves of the sea. Flung myself into that putrescent juice of Earth's inner horrors before the madness of my screams could bring down upon me all the charnel legions these pest gulfs might conceal. He awakens later in a hospital, told that he was found unconscious at the shore. The story ends with him accepting the same legacy as his ancestors, and he's told that Kingsport is a perfectly normal town, not some weird, vigil, ancient people, fish people ritual place. The final paragraph is an excerpt from the Necronomicon. "The nethermost caverns," wrote the mad Arab, "are not for the fathoming of eyes that see, for their marvels are strange and terrific. Curse the ground where dead thoughts live, new and oddly bodied, and evil the mind that is held by no head. Wisely did Ibn Shakabak say that happy is the tomb where no wizard hath lain, and happy the town at night whose wizards are all in ashes. For it is of old rumor that the soul of the devil brought hastes not from his charnel clay, but fats and instructs the very worm that gnaws, till out of corruption horrid life springs, and the dull scavengers of earth wax crafty to vex it and swell monstrous to plague it. Great holes secretly are digged, where earth's pores ought to suffice, and things have learnt to walk that ought to crawl." I really like that last sentence, that things have learned to walk that ought to crawl. It's like these entities in Lovecraft's universe are so ahead of humans that they see them as bugs that became too conscious or something. The creepy flute player reminded me of the guy from Narnia, or even the flute player from the game Remnant from the Ashes. Something about flutes in these stories is especially uncanny. So I'm not sure if during the whole festival he was teleported back in time to where the village looked like that, or he was sent to a different dimension where it still looks like that, but both options are pretty cool to think about. The Last Feast of Harlequin is our second story for today, and this one is written by Thomas Ligotti. And in this one, more than his other stories, I think Lovecraft's influence is pretty clear. The narrator is a huge fan of clowns, so the story begins with his friend telling him about a low-key clown festival in the town of Noroi, known as the Fool's Feast. Since he's obsessed with clowns, he even dresses up as one, he packs his costume and goes to check out the town. And clowns being the thing of the story is great, because it shows that they were Ligotti's fear, like how Lovecraft made fish scary and William Hope Hodgson made hogs scary. So I think it's cool that each one has their own scary archetype in their stories. So he goes to the town and the place looks extremely wrong, a bit of an impossible place, which I am quite a fan of. The parts of the town did not look as if they adhered very well to one another. This condition might be blamed on the irregular topography of the town. Behind some of the old stores in the business district, steeply roofed houses had been erected on a sudden incline, their peaks appearing at an extraordinary elevation above the lower buildings. And because the foundations of these houses could not be glimpsed, they conveyed the illusion of being either precariously suspended in air, threatening to topple down, or else constructed with an unnatural loftiness in relation to their width and mass. This place sort of reminds me like the town from the music of Eric Zahn. And unlike the festival, there are people in the streets here, except they kind of just ignore him. The man, who was shabbily dressed and very old, paused for a moment without approaching the car. Though he had apparently responded to my call, his vacant expression did not betray the least awareness of my presence. And for a moment, I thought it was just a coincidence that he halted on the sidewalk at the same time I addressed him. And he's pretty sure that one of these people is his old college teacher, Dr. Raymond Das, who has been missing for 20 years. But yet here he is in this strange place. And there's a girl, Sarah Beadle, who's also been missing, that he's pretty sure he saw. The girl at town hall reluctantly gives him information about the Fool's Feast. She says that everyone usually just knows it, doesn't have to ask about it. It has that classic horror vibe where you're trying to get information, but everyone's just kind of trying to not give it to you. And it's clear they know more than they admit. When the festival finally begins, the townspeople seem to come alive. They're dancing and having a blast, which is kind of creepy seeing how weird they were acting in the beginning, just mindlessly walking the streets, ignoring the narrator, staying to themselves. But among the celebration, there are these mysterious figures roaming the streets, unbothered by the chaos around them, able to move through the crowds like butter, without causing any commotion or being interrupted by anyone. And the crowd starts attacking these individuals, like it was part of the ritual. The narrator himself tries it, but he feels guilty immediately after and goes to the bar. And in the bar, everybody stops what they're doing and stares at him, of course. And they look like they're wearing the Scream face. I think he meant from that famous painting, The Scream. And actually, I kind of pictured the clowns looking like something like the worms from Noroi. As the festival reaches its peak, he goes back to his room and puts on an attire similar to the mysterious figures in the streets, and he starts acting like them to see what's really going on here. A truck picks all of these individuals up and drives them into the forest, where lanterns form a circle around the clearing, and there's a passage into the earth. One by one, they drop into the hole and crawl through a smooth, round tunnel, as if something massive had burrowed it. They emerge into a cavern the size of a ballroom, with an altar at the center. And then none other than Dr. Raymond Das, his old college teacher, comes out in white robes and starts leading the ritual at the altar. The clowns begin writhing and collapsing, and their bodies turn soft, and they actually morph into worms, inching towards the altar. So on the altar lies the Winter Queen, Sarah Beadle, the girl that's been missing, and she gets sacrificed. The narrator is just watching this happen in shock, and he finally snaps and runs to the exit. When he's running, he can hear his teacher's voice say, "He's one of us. He has always been one of us." And I'm not really sure what this meant. Maybe he was always meant to come here as a witness, or maybe he was meant to be one of the clowns morphing into worms, but he somehow resisted. This story was really good, and it fit the festival theme well. And this is my 6th or 7th Ligotti story. But I have to say, none have hit as hard as the first one I read, which was Gas Station Carnivals. There was something about that one that really hit hard for me. It's uncanny in the best way, and the twist at the end is fantastic. And this is just my taste, but hopefully one of the next stories of his that I read I'll like as much as that one. I wanted to give a big thank you to 40,000 subscribers. This is a very big milestone, and also a huge thank you to the members who've joined the channel. So special thanks to Wiz, Thomas to Becky, and Nighttime. Thank you guys for joining, and I'll see you all in the next video.